Welcome, everybody who may not already know. I'm Amanda with ALSD. Been with the association for the better part of 15, 16 years, and I'm thrilled to be your host for today's webinar. We've got three awesome panelists, but before we get going on our questions today, I do want to call out a couple of notes and housekeeping. First and foremost, hey, Sean, if you want to give us a wave there. Sean's from AVIXA, and that's who our webinar is presented in partnership with today. AVIXA has been a partner of ours for many, many years. And for those who may not know, AVIXA is the Audiovisual and Integrated Experience Association, who operates and educates in the sports and entertainment sector, among many others. So if you want to learn more about AVIXA, Sean, at any point or in the chat box, feel free to share your contact information and tell us about AVIXA or Infocom. But Sean is a panelist and will be loading us up with some data here momentarily. So secondly, and on the esports topic, ALSD has its own tech division now and our own tech symposium, headed up by our own Jessica Gaffney. And while we're going to cover sales and service enablement and innovation, operational efficiencies, business intelligence, we are absolutely going to cover esports as well. So if you're interested in the technology symposium, Jessica at ALSD.com is going to be your best bet. Shoot her a note and let her know what's going on in your world and how you might want to take part in our conference and or our tech symposium. Webinar today, of course, will be recorded, as they always are, and put out on our channels. We'll put it in our monthly e-newsletter, we'll put it on our website, and it'll hit the social feeds as well. We'll be tagging our panelists. In addition to that, Sean has also authored an article called The Rising Esports Tide. So you'll be looking for that on our channels as well. Along with the recording, we will put that up on our channels, and certainly it'll be on AVIXA's too. So with that, I'd like to get started here. So again, joined by panelists today who understand, no doubt about it, better than I do, the competitive esports environment, the venues that house the sport, and how you on here as audience members today can learn how to take part in the esports world as well. So each panelist will introduce himself, name and what he does, and also as a wild card, he has to tell us his favorite sports or esports movie after his introduction. So Sean, I'm going to hand the reins over to you to give an introduction of yourself, AVIXA, and your movie.
Thanks so much, Amanda. It's great to be here today with everyone talking about this. As we noted in the title of the article, The Rising Tide of Esports, come from AVIXA, the Audiovisual and Integrated Experience Association. I'm the Senior Director of Market Intelligence there. We do essentially market sizing, market research about everything Pro AV. Cover that sector pretty extensively with forecasts and demand studies and all that sort of stuff. Been in the industry for quite a while as an industry analyst and working now with AVIXA to stand up and kind of put new research about all things Pro AV. I'm going to go with Ready Player One as my favorite esports because of the topic today, pandering to the audience a little bit, but also just because love the kind of vision as to what the future of all this could look like. It's a little scary to me as you think about it, being a virtual presence avatar online all the time, a little bit scary, but kind of a cool concept for that where all this might be headed. Thanks, Amanda.
I love it. Yeah, thanks for joining us, Sean. Josh, over to you.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk through esports and venues and what's happening in the landscape. So my name is Joshua Kell. I am the CEO of Horizon AVL and Esports Integration. Horizon AVL is a 40-year-old AV integration firm. We've been designing television studios, arenas, stadiums, classroom technology. We're very large in the education sector, do a lot with higher education, helping them develop their plans and strategies when it comes to esports. And Esports Integration is a division that we started about 7 years ago, dedicated specifically to the development of facilities and writing and helping develop programs for colleges, universities, high schools. We've written a full 4-year curriculum wrapped around CTE national standards for high schools. And we're really, really excited about that. And with working with over 100 colleges and universities across the US, we've helped them develop majors, minors, wrapped around the facility and really what is the industry and the landscape and how this is how we can utilize these facilities to create jobs and careers for them in the future. So
Absolutely incredible. Yeah, it's okay. I want to compliment on you and all the gamers in this world who are like, holy shit, I can make money on this now. So congrats to you, man, for getting into college space. We'll talk about that on down the line. So I don't watch my mouth from here on out. But yeah, you got to tell us your favorite sports movie as well.
So favorite sports movie is definitely Dodgeball. If you could dodge a wrench, you could dodge a ball. So keep that in mind. I would also say it's not a movie, but there's a series called 7 Days Out on Netflix. And one is about League of Legends and really the ins and outs of everything that happens for a competition in a space. And I would highly recommend that to everyone who's joining. Check it out. I think it's season 1. It's like the last episode. It's really great information and really exciting to see how the landscape moves and functions. So
super education on education. Brian.
All right. Hi, everyone. Brian Mirakian, Senior Principal at Populous and or Director of Esports. For many of you, you probably know Populous and most of the work that we've done in the sports entertainment space for the better part of the last 40 years in traditional sports and ballparks and arenas and NFL stadiums. But we really began to look at the emerging landscape in esports and digital entertainment almost 8 years ago now, which is pretty incredible. I was looking at an article that I contributed to for Gizmodo in 2013, and I was like, wow, it's just amazing that it's come as far as it has, as fast as it has. So we're really excited and continue to be really excited as a practice in terms of understanding and learning, how the venues and infrastructure of today and tomorrow is going to support this entertainment landscape and really this wave that continues to come just around esports and gaming. And so we've been very, very fortunate to be involved in some pretty groundbreaking work in esports venue design and in a number of projects that are continuing to emerge. And I'm excited to have the conversation today. So my favorite sports movie is Field of Dreams. I've always loved that movie, and with the Field of Dreams event that we were involved with Major League Baseball being held on site in Iowa, that was really cool to see Kevin Costner come back and be a part of that. So, but that movie has always been one of my favorites. So anyway, happy to join the conversation today.
Yeah, I appreciate having you, Brian, and you're obviously well known in these circles. So thank you for joining us. And I think it's really cool to see how we are now building sports events based on like pop culture. That's so cool. And I think that we're just going to see it continue. And this is one of the segments where I think we're going to see a lot of growth. So esports it is. And I won't read the prompt all the way through. Those that are joining know what it is, but the title is the Uptick, Upside, and Underpinning of Esports Events. So we have about 40 minutes here to talk to these three panelists, and the chat box is open. So for anyone who wants to pop a question in there, if we have time to get to it, we certainly will. And if anybody, again, cares to share their contact information, you can do that in the chat box or at the end of the webinar. So I'd like to get started, though, just framing esports just a little bit further, although I think it was a nice jumping off point with the introductions. I'm going to turn to Josh, an expert in the space. Most of the people on here have a basic understanding of esports and gaming, but tell us how you describe the gaming communities and perhaps how esports differs from the stick and ball sports that many of our venues have become accustomed to hosting.
Sure. So really, we want to look and rewind, a few decades and kind of look a little bit at the history and the community, because that's the big aspect, right? The esports and gaming community does differ because you do have cultural differences, but you look at the 80s, late 70s to 80s, consoles are coming home for the first time, right? From Atari to Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Genesis to PlayStation. And that's sort of like the first iteration, right? That's my childhood growing up. We're going over to our friend's house and we're enjoying playing these games together. And that's where things are birthing in the community. And then there's sort of a second phase where the world of the internet is coming online, and LAN parties and networking games that are networked, like Unreal Tournament, Quake, and eventually, Counter-Strike. And in 2001, 2002, I was actually on the Counter-Strike team and competed. So there was all this new. It wasn't esports back then, right? It was still this level of just gaming competition. And so then you see this base and this foundation of this community starting to grow. And through that competition world, coming into, 2008, something that actually is not really super popular happening in the US culture, but more in European and Asian markets. You're seeing, internet cafes rise up. You're seeing this community sort of going to and enjoying and watching video games being played with local competitions that are happening in these markets. And so the third iteration of that is really Spectators, right? So now we have, from original us enjoying it to now more people watching than actually playing sometimes, where you're having millions of people that are tuning in to a live event. League of Legends Worlds is right around the corner. So when you have millions of people that are watching in these environments, it's now shifted to that level of community. And that's something really interesting to understand as far as the community is concerned, because they're watching and consuming this content a lot of times, through platforms like YouTube Gaming and Twitch. But then that social element is a key aspect to the community simultaneously. They are interacting with each other, simultaneously watching the game. And so when you look at traditional sports, we are either watching on linear television and at home in the comforts of our home, maybe a small party for a Super Bowl or something of that nature, right? And that's as far as that community sort of goes within the house. And then you have the actual event and the venue where it's being hosted, where there are tens of thousands of people that are there. And so the unique element of the community and the gaming community is the online aspect, and really that integration between the physical venue and the actual interaction of social media is massive. And that's really where the community is, right? I have a 13-year-old now and a 10-year-old, and the way that they consume content and this culture, and that's the big thing that we have to understand, is this community and the culture that's rising up right now is more geared towards these devices, right? And how they consume content, and what is our trajectory in including that. So as part of what they're used to, their pastime, right? What they enjoy watching and seeing, that community is very much an online community.
Amanda,
yeah, please.
Yeah, I was just going to add, great synopsis by Joshua there. I think the thing you might add is the rise of the gaming star, right? So if we think back to one of the key milestones in all of this was, with Twitch TV or YouTube and other channels and social media really elevating and providing a spotlight for these gaming superstars. PewDiePie, one of the classics, back, 10, 15 years ago even. That provided the role model, of course, and an example for how to make gaming into a profession, right? So that's the point at which we started to see this major demographic shift away as well from what was conventional traditional sports, stick and ball sports, MLB, NHL, NFL. All of them were seeing their viewership go down as a result, partially because of the rise of these gaming superstars. So I think that's been part of the phenomenon as well, is, as we'll talk about it today, I think, is companies, educators, lots of different audience groups looking to try to recapture or tap into this audience, recover the audience, recover some of their eyeballs. So that's a lot of what's happened, is a desire to stay in front of this key 18 to 25 and on to 35-year-old demographic. Hence, where, follow the money, right? Where they're, as those groups gain in their ability to spend, they become more and more attractive as an audience, and venues start to pay attention more as well. Just wanted to add that little nod to the old PewDiePie in there as we go.
Well, and you actually dovetailed nicely into one of the questions I wanted to ask you later on anyway, and I'm going to ask it now. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon that esports is partially or wholly responsible for, is attracting demographics who are either new or came over from other sports. And you just mentioned that yourself. Like there are viewers and supporters of esports coming over from the other stick and ball sports. Now, no disrespect to them, but maybe we can pinpoint why is that happening? Is it because of what Josh already pointed out, that we are on our devices so much, and that is our pastime now? So Sean, is there any data or anecdotes to back that up of where these demographics are coming from?
It's been a migration. I think, as Josh laid out, it's something we've watched over the last 20, 30 years. When gaming came into the mix as another medium for us to consume, it was just we have finite time. The ultimate end game of all this is that we only have so much time to choose what we're going to consume. And so I think demographics kind of gradually, as they became interested in games, as they had example superstars to kind of follow, as new channels emerged like Twitch and other, it just started to shift over. So they've migrated away from, I think, if you look at stats, one of the hardest hit has been MLB, I think, has reported some of the biggest declines in some of their audience as they age out and as other sports kind of come into the mix. So I think it's been that slow progress. I think you could look across different sports to see where they've come from, but it's a general theme that I think we've been talking about. Sure, Josh and Brian have some more to add to that as well.
Well, what I want each of them to add, and this is a question for Josh and Brian both, so ping pong off of one another, but I want to go back to the beginning here, like almost pre-day one. If I'm an operator or even a tech company or someone putting the audio visuals into the venue, and I desire to get into the esports space, I want esports in my venue programming. Where do I start? Who do I need to talk to? What do I need to know? So Josh or Brian, do you want to take that one?
Well, yeah, I'll start, and Josh, please add in. I mean, I think that one of the things that we've found is there's a lot of diversification of venues that are happening, in the marketplace at the moment, and certainly there are operators and ownership groups that are in existing venues that they're wanting to attract esports programming. And the reality is that there are fewer impediments than I think people might assume. Any venue that has a basic technology backbone that's fairly modernized can attract and host a competition. There are a lot of kind of unique aspects to sort of back of house requirements that need to be accounted for, and things that are suitable for competitor needs. And especially if you're going to be hosting a tournament, you need to have areas for dedicated team spaces and ancillary spaces for family rooms, things like that. A lot of these competitors are young, and some of them are traveling from overseas, right? And they may be coming to the United States for the first time, right? But what we find is there's a massive amount of popularity and interest growing around esports and gaming in general. And I was out in Los Angeles in April, talked to Russ Simons, and they were hosting an event at the YouTube Theater at the SoFi complex for a Rocket League event that they sold out in like the first 18 minutes. You're talking about a 6,000 seat venue, right, for a Rocket League competition. And many of the teams were international, coming over to the United States for the first time. And it was just incredible to see. I mean, the way that they activated, the peripheral plaza spaces, the way that the crowds were engaged all weekend. It was really, really wonderful to see, and just a really good indicator of where the industry is going as a whole. So if you have an auditorium space, YouTube Theater is a perfect example, but there's many other venues in that mid-tier size. Let's call it 5,000 seats, are perfectly suited for esports competitions. Certainly, when you're getting into arena-sized venues, hosting major competitions is always a possibility. But I would say, just at a broader level, what we're very excited to see is that there's a real emerging sort of spectrum of venue types that are happening. Everything from, like Esports Stadium Arlington, which was one of our projects in Arlington, which is an adaptive reuse of a convention center, to a lot of activity happening on the collegiate landscape at the moment. Universities wanting to invest in their campuses for improvements around student life, and establishing varsity esports scholarship programs, and what I see across the board is when ownership groups are investing into these venues, what they're looking for is maximum versatility, right? We're working on a few venues right now, one in Toronto with Live Nation and Overactive Media, where it's a 5,000 plus seat venue, and it will be designed to be suited for the professional needs of overactive's professional esports teams, but will also be designed to support live music, comedy shows, TED Talks, award shows, programming, all sorts of things in between. So that you can not only, have a premier venue for esports, but you can also backfill all those days and have a complete, entertainment calendar. And that's going to be really important, I think, as we look at this industry as a whole. Planning for esports today and the amount of events that you're going to be able to host is going to be very much different in 5 and 10 years from now. And so having the versatility designed into these venues to support other forms of programming is really critical. So I don't know, Josh, anything to add to that?
Yeah, when you're taking into consideration, operating these events, I will go back to the gaming culture and understanding it, because there are some nuances and some things that you really have to understand coming into it. Yeah, and Brian touched on a few of those. You have younger players that are coming in, and it may be their first event, and really the inner workings of how all that happened. The consideration of the space and the infrastructure is key to that, and having someone understand what the software developers need, because they're going to be rolling in certain amount of gear. There can certainly have gear that is provided in the venue and can be well equipped to handle a lot of these events. But the servers and the software that they're bringing is always going to be unique, because they're constantly rolling out updates and changes. If you go back to like League of Legends' first tournament that was outside the Staples Center, they were using the internet and quickly found out that the finals, things were not working out the way it should have been. And then next year it was all server based and everything was housed within that. And that became sort of now the standard. So if Blizzard, Activision, or, Epic or Riot is coming to look at a venue in a space, there are going to be certain requirements that they're going to be bringing to the table. But that infrastructure, fiber infrastructure, networking infrastructure is extremely key to understand. And yes, we house a lot of things in the collegiate space, but still that understanding is still true, right? Because we look at latency issues, we look at, because that all comes into play into how the gamer's experience is at the end of the day. If we're introducing things to their devices, the PCs, peripherals, for a broadcast sake, and then it takes their frame rates down, and now they're only at 60 hertz as opposed to 144 or 240 hertz. These are the technical aspects that a lot of people don't always think through. Now, the software developers pretty much know all of that and will have those requirements coming into it. And you're looking at, large groups that kind of host these tournaments and these events. They kind of already have that down. But if you are a venue that is looking to bring someone on, have someone with eSport experience, not necessarily that they have to have tournament experience. That would be great, because it's something very unique, and it's not like what everyone else is doing. The Raleigh Majors in 2019, we were working with Acer and Intel on that particular project, and ESL was coming in. They were part of working with Ubisoft, part of the Rainbow Six Majors in Raleigh, and that's a 5,000, 6,000 seat capacity from a size perspective. But throughout the entire week, we had all of these different rooms for the team quarterfinals and playoffs, and it was broadcast in multiple different languages. So there was the multiple broadcast suites, and so all of that went into consideration. So as a venue looking into this, there are going to be some differences, and because streaming and social media is such an intricate part of this community, it's very important to make sure that whoever's running that within the venue needs to have a really good understanding of those outcomes.
I have so many questions. Do you see sports, our venues like SoFi that Brian may have just been talking about, who do you see running the esports events within those particular venues? Is there a specific esports point of contact now? Is that the chief technology officer? Brian, do you have any insight on that?
That's a really good question, Amanda. I don't know. I think most organizations, yes, now are identifying folks, at a leadership level that are really now taking seriously, right? Chief technology officer, that sort of position, just to be able to support, this groundswell of activity, right? One thing I was going to say too is that beyond just the resources side. One of the things that we've found, at least when designing these venues, is just the amount of planning that needs to happen on the front end in terms of the capital investment side, just on the technology component. I mean, just as a frame of reference, with Esports Stadium Arlington, that was an adaptive reuse, but of the roughly $14 million that we spent on that build construction. About 35 to 40% of that was technology, and things that candidly most fans didn't see, right? To Joshua's point, one of the things that's really critical with these venues when you're designing and contemplating designing a venue, whether it's adaptive reuse or a ground up or just investing into your current facility, having the broadcast production capability is really essential, right? You've got to be able to run the events, but then stream the event, right? That's one of the things that's really unique about esports and gaming. It's going out to a global audience. Oftentimes you have secondary studios that are set up so you can have analysts and commentators that are broadcasting in different languages. You have different sort of officials that are behind the scenes watching the gameplay and action in sort of private, broadcast kind of studio spaces. You have editing areas. You have server rooms. You have miles of cable that has to be, contemplated and built in. And then frankly, what gives you the versatility is the camera equipment as well, on the front of house side, so that you can shoot the event, and again, stream it, alongside the audio visual requirements, just on the screens, the show lighting, everything in between, right? And so it all adds up. But what that does do is it creates a readiness for your venue, right? Because when the ESLs of the world, or the major, event tours, you're wanting to attract to your venue, when you can essentially provide them a house package that meets all their needs because you've invested in that in the front end, you're going to set yourself apart, amongst many different competitors for those events, because they're not going to have to spend $100,000+ to bring in all their gear for that weekend event, right? And so when we're planning venues today for all of our clients, we're having the same conversations in terms of making sure that we're investing in the right types of infrastructure that anyone, whether it's an Activision, Riot, ESL, across the board, when they're contemplating what venue do they want to go into, it's the ones that have that baseline infrastructure in place. And so it's been really important step in the planning stages.
I have a twofold type question then. For any of the three of you, are we then seeing new venues go up? Are those the best fits? Are venues that exist, can they accommodate esports because of for all the reasons that you said? Are they ready? Are they equipped? Do they have the created readiness, as you say? And then the second part of that question is, what types of venues are the best fit for esports right now? Now, there may not be a one-size-fits-all answer there, and pun intended, because the audience sizes may differ. But what are you guys seeing in terms of the best venues to be used for esports these days?
I'll start it off, but I'm sure you guys are going to have their thoughts as well. I think one of the things that's unique and interesting about esports, as we've studied this over the years, is to just watch the way that people naturally enjoy going to events. I mean, what's really fun about esports events is that oftentimes when it's in like a tournament style, it's a weekend type of affair, right? And you're going for preliminary matches on Fridays, Saturdays. Oftentimes you'll have a championship event on a Sunday. But what makes it really fun is that it's not just all about an online culture. That is a fun part of it. But what makes it really interesting and what people really enjoy is the social aspect. And there's all sorts of fun things around esports, whether, or, in gaming, whether it's, dressing up in costumes or meeting characters, or, the activation zones, that we, Sean mentioned sort of the celebrity dynamic, early on, there's all this kind of thing culturally that surrounds esports. So having places in your venue that you can activate, because people are on site for hours, especially in the preliminary rounds, and you're going to an event, you're sitting in an auditorium, but you want to have, places to socialize in between. Great food and beverage, right? It's all the things that are really, really important. And so venues that have those kind of peripheral spaces to activate, we find that those are really, really, excellent design considerations that need to be built in, either if you have a venue or one that you're contemplating from ground up. But, we just find that, when people enjoy spectating a little bit differently around esports, with optimization towards sight lines, towards screens, right? So it's a little bit different, in like a traditional, sporting venue. Let's just take a Lakers game, for example. Everybody wants the Jack Nicholson seats because they want to be right on the court. In esports, actually, what we find is people actually enjoy sitting up higher, oftentimes in the lower areas of an upper balcony, right, or the upper areas in the lower bowl, because they have more optimization of sight lines to a screen, right? And so there's things that we find that people naturally kind of gravitate towards. But in terms of ideal venues, we've seen that change over time. Arenas, are well suited. What we find today now is a lot of the stage setups in an arena venue will be along what we call the longitudinal section. So like a wide, kind of a wide format. We found that it's Reliant Stadium in Houston. It was the first League of Legends event that was held in an NFL stadium in history earlier in the year. There was 40,000 people that went to that venue, right? And that was essentially a stage that was 70 yards wide. It's incredible, right? And all the way down to what I mentioned earlier. The YouTube Theater is a 6,000 seat venue, that's an auditorium, fan-shaped auditorium, right? So I think that, we have a plethora of venues in the United States and in North America, certainly, that can support esports day one, right? But as we design the venues kind of in the future around a lot of the idealistic things that I mentioned around technology, backbone, production studio space, optimization of sight lines, and the ability to activate peripherally, all those things go into the ideal venue. But I'll kind of stop there. I'm sure Josh, Sean, you guys have your opinions on it too.
I mean, I'll definitely second the experience of the venue itself. The activations and that social element, and because it's such a long event, right, over the course of several days, their favorite team might not be playing in that time, but they still are enjoying time in the space and working with some of our clients as far as developing those activations in those spaces where we actually had mini tournaments in the booth, whether it was with Acer and Intel. And so that was really exciting to see, because they are also playing the game in which they're coming to watch. And then we had some celebrities come in as well, and they played against them. Like whoever won the tournament was able to then to play against. At that time was Shroud. So you have a lot of unique opportunities when you're coming into these venues, that it's not just about the game. There's so much that happens in this environment, where you're seeing people buying peripherals. They're buying, you're buying mice and keyboards that the players are using in headsets, right? So there's a lot of these different opportunities in these venues that extend beyond just the competition, because it's such a long period of time. So that's something definitely is very unique into these venues, and how these venues should sort of look at these opportunities. And then, we do see a lot of renovations. We actually rarely see buildups that are dedicated to esports, right? There are the few that are out there, and that's mostly been Brian and his team. But what we see is today for our clients, it is a lot of renovations. We look at, a 10, 15,000 square foot space, smaller spaces, larger spaces, and let's renovate this as a first step, right? We've had the opportunity to have conversations with the Detroit Red Wings, Little Caesars arena, and they a few years ago wanted to understand, what does this look like? How do we, Hockeytown USA, bring in esports into the space, because we're seeing some of the decline, and we really want to meet this demographic. And so how do you uniquely bring in smaller esports spaces for those, mom and dad might be coming to watch the game, but their kids, there's a space for them. And then we've even seen playoffs even at a hockey game, which has been great, because now they're playing NHL, whatever version is out that particular year in that game. And then there's a competition down on the ice between one of the periods. So those are very unique experiences that can be brought to the venues.
It really makes sense when you kind of look at this as a birth of a medium. So if we kind of think about, where we are as being described by the panelists, more remodel, in the pro AV space, for example, we kind of talk about a live event versus a fixed install performance entertainment solution. So, integration versus live events, two different parts of this spectrum of opportunity that exists in pro AV. You sort of see that playing out here too, right? You've got, in some cases, we have live events companies helping to bring into a esports activation into an existing venue. You've got remodel happening, but it sort of makes sense over time if you follow the money, as more and more kind of opportunity exists here, as more and more advertisers, as more and more promoters, as the whole ecosystem kind of matures. You could expect that over time we would see more dedicated venue. It just sort of makes some sense. We have dedicated football stadiums, soccer stadiums, basketball arenas, MMA in a lot of ways. So over time, there's enough there that this becomes its own kind of phenomenon. So it'd be a great thing to sort of track in the evolution of this whole kind of market. Kind of, where are we? Are we now getting to the point where there's enough opportunity that, that we're seeing a lot more stadiums? I think you guys, Brian and Josh, would be the first to speak to that as you see those proposals or opportunities come in through your door. But it makes sense that we're kind of at that remodel, live event, rekitting of space. But reflect on what Brian and Josh have been talking about of requirements, technical requirements, significant back-end infrastructure, different types of areas of engagement, activation, marketplaces that are building up. The more and more that those become specialized or required by this particular activation, then you could see it requires more dedicated space. I would think it would require more venues that are really purposely built with this in mind. I would say in Pro AV, we've already been talking about for years this dimension of back-end infrastructure for broadcast and streaming and all that sort of stuff. It's becoming almost a common currency now, coming out of the pandemic where everything went remote and we were supporting remote audiences, that skill set, that capability within venues, skill set within integrator, installer, or live events, and within staff, that's become more and more important and is kind of shaping the landscape for solutions provision overall. So exciting to kind of see, but certainly challenges as companies look to try to address those specialized needs for sure.
Yeah, and I'm hearing renovations are big, and I think that is what we have seen. We've also seen where major venues, if they are new or if they're just tacking on, if you will, a theater attached to the venue, and perhaps that is the best fit for it, depending on what the audience is. Or if you have a Reliant where it can't house that many, again, it can be flexible. You use the smaller theater for smaller events and the larger for others. So that's something to think about too. The other thing that I've been, racking my brain about for years, Josh, is that a computer mouse, the plural of that is actually mice.
That's what I say.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mind blown. I've been wondering that for years. Hey, stay off mute because I want to ask you about esports as a college major. You mentioned it at the top of the call, and hats off to you for writing curriculum for college programs. Like, what is happening in college? Number one, college kids obviously are a demographic that are gamers and that are, feeding into this phenomenon, if you will. But two, we're now creating a major and a career around this. So tell us what you're doing. That's pretty cool in this space.
Sure. So one, it is not typical for an AV integrator ever to write curriculum. That has been one of our big challenges. A lot of my peers they've said you're nuts. But I look at, though, our industry and I say, we are always starving for talented individuals to go through programs and to experience all of these opportunities, right? Whether it's AV integration, it's broadcast, it's content creation, it's IT, cybersecurity, marketing. So several years ago, we kind of rolled up our sleeves and said, well, what are we missing in the market, right? All of our guys here, as from an integration perspective, CTS, right? We have our certifications. We're all in from an AVIXA perspective. But what's happening at a middle school and high school level to prepare that? And really, actually, what's furthering that education with colleges and universities? So we like I said, rolled up our sleeves and developed for high schools a full 4-year CTE, which stands for Career and Technical Education. And it meets a lot of the national CTE course standards that most high schools nationwide accept. And basically what it does is it opens them up through the vessel of esports, right? Esports is just the vessel to teach them the skills necessary. I give this example in one of our presentations. I have a picture of an arcade console that at that time my son was 9. And for a whole summer, we built this arcade console. I brought home architectural drawings. I showed him how to read them. I showed him how to solder. I showed him how to build a breadboard. I showed him how to program. We built everything together, start to finish. The end result was video games. But through that process, he learned how to read architectural plans, critical thinking skills that can be developed, taking fractions of reading. Okay, if it's a 1/4 inch for every inch or every foot, well, what does that equate to? Understanding electrical engineering. And so that was sort of then the basis of our design for the curriculum. And so now we kind of fast forward to today, working with over 100 colleges and universities, working with countless high schools and developing their process. We are really taking what students enjoy from a cultural perspective and really putting it to use. They love Mr. Beast. They love watching Dude Perfect and all of these content creators. They're playing games. They're doing fun, creative shorts. And so that's what's driving these students. So we wanted to take that energy and really that cultural understanding and then bring that to colleges and universities. And what that is doing is that is producing now, our first full set will actually be this year for college of students actually going through some of the programs that have been developed where they will understand live events, tournament management. They will understand production. They're going to understand graphic design. And so what this is doing is now we are setting the stage really for those individuals for, we talked about operators and the individuals who are going to be potentially hiring an esports director for that particular venue, which in the college and university perspective and even high school, those positions really exist. They hire esports directors, not just coaches from a competitive side, but someone who's overseeing their program. And so, from an industry perspective, we are really stacking the deck to prepare students for these venues, for these events, and really for these skill sets from an audiovisual perspective to managing large production. So something we're really, really excited about.
As you should be. That's absolutely incredible. And I have my husband, now I'm texting him because he's an educational leader at a career technology center. And so I'm telling him, all right, you need to call Josh tomorrow. So at any rate, it's really cool what you're doing. Hey guys, we are up against the clock. So I want to spend the last just minute or two here in closing with each panelist kind of giving us 30 seconds on how big we predict esports might get. But the key to that question is, how can our industry counterparts help us get there? What is that one critical piece of information or advice that you would give your counterparts in the industry of how we continue that evolution and that growth of esports? And Sean, I'll start with you.
Well, the advice part's the hardest part, but I think the size and the opportunity has been a real question mark. I'm hearing, you look up esports online, and you're going to see estimations of this being a billion audience, a size of a billion people watching esports across the globe over the next 5 years. So clearly a large opportunity, even though within the $31 billion venues space that we see for Pro AV already, I expect this to be a larger and larger chunk of that going forward. How we get there, I think, boy, Josh just kind of highlighted a really key component, and that is a story across our industry is how do we build the skills to serve, right? How do we keep our pipeline full of skilled professionals who are able to help us through the nuances of a space like this? It's a big challenge for Pro AV and industries at large with unemployment being so low. So I would double down on that one for sure as a key component.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Couldn't agree more. Brian.
I would say that, obviously it's all working together. I mean, but we always follow the market. What do people want? What do people want from an entertainment standpoint? What do they want from a content standpoint? And, what we have seen and we will continue to see is a widening diversification of the spectrum of people that enjoy esports and gaming programming content. There are more people over 55 that identify as gamers than at any point of world history, right? So this is not about 9 and 10 and 15 or 18-year-olds playing any longer. This is about basically a global level of popularity around esports and gaming content and participation. And as Josh talked about earlier, it's much of it is mobile driven, but it's everywhere driven. Right. And if there was one thing the last 2 years taught us, when there was massive growth around esports and gaming content, is that we're still in the early days, honestly, of where this is headed. I think, from a traditional sports standpoint, we still see across the board, whether it's the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, trying to find that avenue and conduit into a young audience. And it's not only a young audience, it's an every person audience. And so, what we see certainly is that we all need to continue to work together, right? My advice is to follow the market and follow the trends that are happening, but working together to set the trend. And so, I just have found that with our clients, those that are progressive and investing, towards this, some special things are happening. But again, I look at just the indicators in the industry. I look at the president of Riot Games, saying that essentially every one of their titles moving forward. You're talking about the publisher that's has published two of the most popular games in the world, League of Legends, Valorant, saying that every one of their titles moving forward is going to be a competitive format. Which means that we have to have venues that can host competitions, right? And so all the indicators are there. It's working closely with partners. It's working closely with our clients, and it's candidly just collaborating at every level. And my advice is to just continue to have an open eye to what's happening around us in this industry. Understand that it's global. And understand that this is something that is still in early days, it's still very formational. And where we're going to be in 5 to 10 years is very different than it is today. But continuing to have, an emphasis around, collaborating and innovating, and we're gonna continue to design some pretty special things. So that would just be my advice.
Can't wait to see some of these new spaces, Brian. Josh, before it's game over for all of us, give us your advice.
Advice is definitely understanding the culture, because that culture is really going to, and I think Brian put a great synopsis of, it's not just 10-year-olds to 18-year-olds. It is a range of cultures that are really gravitating towards esports and gaming and this whole genre of entertainment. And so that is something that really needs to be focused on is how do you meet that culture where they're at, whether they're online or physically in the venue, and bringing those two worlds together is also very key in that development. So yeah, that would be my advice. culture.
Yeah, a bunch of great advice on here today, guys. Please link in with these gentlemen. They're obviously experts in their space, and we thank them very much. We obviously thank our partners at AVIXA. I think a lot of that data will be continued to be captured by our partners at AVIXA, so reach out anytime. Guys, can't thank you enough, can't thank our audience enough. We will see a lot more in the esports space, and hopefully of all three of you. Thank you all for joining. Thanks to our panelists.